הרב מימון, בן זקן, שיחיה, ולדת רב חסן, קהל קדוש. I was asked to say a small Divrei Torah. I'll say something that we mentioned in last week's Parashah Ki Tetzeh. The Torah there tells us about how we're supposed to treat our workers. The Pasuk says, "B'yomot titen secharo," that we must pay the workers on time. B'yomot titen secharo. In certain cases, "V'lo tavo alav hashemesh," you cannot wait until the sun comes down. For good reason, ki anihu. The worker is ani. He needs that money. Ve'elav hu noseh et nafsho. And he's anticipating for that check. He's waiting for it. He's noseh et nafsho. He's waiting for it, anticipating and craving it. And therefore the pasuk says, "B'yomot iten secharo." But we explained this pasuk based on a rabbi called the Kerem Shlomo, who has a novel interpretation of B'yomot iten secharo. He says that we're made up of two parts. One part is obviously physical, the other part is spiritual. And the physical part cannot exist unless it's nourished. And a person has to have the right nutrients and the proper hydration and the proper foods in order for him to exist physically. If a person would go on some sort of hunger strike, his body would become malnutrition. He would be scurvy or anemic or any other vitamin deficiency, which would really cause his death. Similarly, we have in the neshama. The neshama also needs nourishment. It doesn't benefit from a thick steak or a glass of wine. The neshama only benefits from spiritual nourishment, which is Torah and mitzvot, specifically Torah. Torah is the food for the soul. But we have a problem. Most of Klal Yisrael are strapped for time. We make time to eat, but just barely during the day. And now we ask that we should find time to learn. We might not have time during the 6 days during the week because we're trying to make a living. And we wake up early in the morning. It's enough that we come to the Bet Knesset and we have to run to the office. We're lucky if we can make it till after Alon Shabeah. And then we run out and go make a parnasah. We come home and we're haggard. At 7, 8 o'clock already, we're tired and we have to go to bed in order to wake up for the next day. So to ask businessmen like yourselves to put in hours during the week to the study of Torah is quite difficult. It doesn't exempt anybody, but it's a challenge. For this, God gave us a great gift called the Shabbat. The purpose of the Shabbat is actually to make up for lost time that we weren't able to do during the week. There's no excuse on Shabbat. The businessmen might say, well, Shabbat, that's my day I sleep because I'm working the whole week. The Arizal said the businessman does not have that luxury. When we say Shabbat is Rashi Tevot Shina b'Shabbat Ta'anug, sleeping on Shabbat is a Ta'anug, that's talking to the Talmidei Hachamim. Talmidei Hachamim will learn the whole week. So they can spoil themselves and take an extra couple of Z's on Shabbat. But the businessman that's neglectful of his spiritual obligations during the week, for good reason, because he's making a parnasah. But now Shabbat is the day of rest, meaning day of rest, not in the bed, day of rest from the physical labors, and now it's a day where one can tend to his nutrition of the soul. I remind you what the Yerushalmi says, Lo nitinu Shabbatot v'yamim tovim v'Yisrael, ela kadesh yasku b'hem b'Torah. The Shabbat was given for that reason, so the people could study Torah. And I remind you of the famous midrash that the Tur brings down, the beginning of V'chot Shabbat. There, the midrash says something to the effect where the Jewish people were going into the land of Israel, and the Torah had a claim against God, and said, listen, when they were in the Midbar, they didn't have too many obligations, so they were able to study me all day long. Now they're going to go into Israel. Each one's going to get a parcel of land. This one's going to sit under his fig tree, and this one under his date tree, and this one's going to plow, and this one's going to have to fertilize, this one's going to have to plant, etc. What's going to be with me? They're not going to have time to study me. This was the claim that the Torah had to God when the Jewish people were about to enter Israel. God answers the Torah, I have a day for you. Your day is going to be Shabbat. Shabbat, the Jewish people will be able to make up a lot of the lost time that they didn't have during the week. Now, although it doesn't work like that physically, which is if a person says, you know what, I'm not going to eat for 6 days, and Shabbat I'll eat, to make up. Clearly it doesn't work that way. The Hidush is that in spirituality you can make up these days for Shabbat. The Gemara says one rabbi, when he wasn't able to learn one day, used to pay back the next day. Yazifu para. Yazif means he would borrow from one day and pay it back the next day. Now, you can't say, well, I won't eat lunch today, and I'll eat double lunch tomorrow, and my body will, just put it in the right place. It doesn't work that way physically. Spiritually, but you can be yazifu para. You can borrow from one day, you can pay it to the next day. Now, I remind you of the Bein Ish Chai that said that 1 hour of studying Torah on Shabbat equals 1,000 hours during the week. So it's not just, exponential, it's 1,000 times. So therefore, if a person, learns 2-3 hours on the Shabbat, he's got 3,000 hours under his pocket. That's much more to be able to learn during the week if he was learning 24 hours a day. So it's not only qualitatively, but quantitatively greater. So Shabbat is a key day for learning. And if a person's a businessman, one has to organize his Shabbat that there's going to be learning.
Right.
The Kaf HaHaim brings down, somebody mentioned that there's a Kaf HaHaim class, maybe you got to it, that every Motzei Shabbat, when the Neshama goes up to heaven, Saturday night, the first question the Bet Din asks the Neshama every Saturday night, what Hidush did you learn today? What did you learn today? Now they don't ask him that on Tuesday night, because on Tuesday night they assume, hey, maybe he didn't learn today, he was busy working. But on Shabbat, he had 25 hours of rest from work. Something must have been, now if the person goes, oh, well, we had an old French bottle of wine. That's not considered learning something. And if the person goes, well, we had the Hameen was incredible this week. That's not learning something. They ask you, what Hidush did you get? Not in the culinary experience that you had. What did you learn? What mental knowledge did you get? And a person's going to have to say, Hidushim. If that's the case, the Kerem Shilawah learns this pasuk as follows. Biyomo titen secharo. Biyomo is referring to Shabbat. Titen secharo, pay back the reward to the neshama. How do I know biyomo titen secharo is talking about that the payback to the neshama is Shabbat? Because if you take the Rashi Tevot, biyomo titen secharo, it's Rashi Tevot Shabbat. Shabbat is Rashi Tevot, biyomo titen secharo. It is on that day where you give the reward to the neshama. Why? Because velo tavo alav hashemesh. You don't want the shemesh, which is a representation of the neshama, which is like bright like the sun. You don't want it to pass. You don't want the neshama to leave this world or Saturday night and not be able to answer. Ki anihu, because the neshama is poor. Or the way we're explaining it tonight, it's malnutrition. Elav hu noseh et nafsho. And the neshama is waiting for Shabbat. Elav hu noseh et nafsho. All the 6 days during the week he's waiting. When is the Shabbat going to come so the guy can finally open up a book? And therefore, it's a reminder to us that while we're allowed to make a parnasah, nobody can have any claims against us. If God wanted us to learn 24 hours a day, He wouldn't have put the burden of parnasah on us. So clearly we're allowed to go make a living. Clearly we're allowed to go to work. Certainly should we steal time during the week to learn? Of course. We're not saying this is an excuse that you don't have to learn at all during the week. But it's hard to concentrate during the week and learn with the proper head when our mind is on other things. But we have no excuse on Shabbat. The last point I'll tell you is the Gemara on Shabbat. I had this question on the Gemara Shabbat when I learned it many times. And I recently saw an answer to it by the great rabbi called Rabbi Eliyahu Kohen Me'izmir in one of his drashot, and I think it's in Midrash Tabri. There the question is, The Gemara writes, Hillel mechayev et ha'aniyim. That Hillel is going to obligate all the aniyim. And the way we're learning it now is all those malnutrition souls. Hillel's going to obligate them. Hillel's going to mandate that nobody has an excuse not to learn. Because he had a very hard time making a parnasah. Hillel was a poor man. He, maybe made a coin a day. And the very meager salary he gave to his wife, and half of his salary he would pay as entrance to get into the Bet Midrash. Yeah. And still he didn't miss a day. And on the day that he didn't have the money to enter into the Bet Midrash, he went up to the roof, it says, and he put his ear to the skylight until he was buried in a snowstorm, and they had to bring him down, and they had to thaw him out, and eventually they gave him an easy pass to come into the Bet Midrash whenever he wanted. Eventually they gave him a presidency. But the Gemara says Hillel didn't use his poverty or his busyness to exempt him from learning Torah. He found the time. So Hillel's ma'ayev, all those hungry souls that say, well, I'm too busy to work, I'm too busy to make time. Well, you're not as poor as Hillel, and you're not as struggling as Hillel. Today especially, things are automated, so we could really find time even during the week. While I'm telling you that you should, of course, spend your Shabbatot learning, I'm not saying it to exempt yourself during the week. Hillel did not exempt himself during the week, even though he had a good excuse. So the Gemara's language is Hillel mechayev et ha'aniyim. Then the Gemara says about another rabbi, Rabbi Azar ben Hasom. Then the Gemara talks about Yosef. And it quotes 3 different episodes. And then at the end the Gemara repeats, Nimsa. Conclusion, Hillel mechayev et ha'aniyim. So I ask, why does the Gemara repeat it? The Gemara starts off, Hillel mechayev et ha'aniyim. Then it says Nimsa. As if the moral of the story is, Hillel mechayev et ha'aniyim. Why does it have to say it twice? The Gemara is very, very economical, doesn't waste its words. So the Biliyahu HaKohen Izmir says, anybody that came after Hillel had Hillel as a model. So they're obligated. So he asked, what about the people that came before Hillel? They didn't have the role model Hillel to learn from. So maybe you're going to tell me, well, for 2,000 years till Hillel surfaced, those people that were making a panasah and the reek, maybe they didn't have to learn. Nobody was there to obligate. Hillel can only be a role model for everybody after him. Says Biliyahu HaKohen, it's a false premise. Because, ask yourself a question. Who was Hillel's role model? Who motivated Hillel? Hillel didn't have anybody to learn from. Hillel was self-motivated. And the Gemara is coming to tell me that study of Torah has to be something that it should be so understood to you. You didn't have to learn from anybody that you have to eat. The fact that a child, when he's hungry, and automatically he gravitates to the cupboard and start taking cookies. And you say to the child, who did you learn that from? I didn't learn it from anybody. That's intuitive. That's something that's natural. You don't need a mentor to teach you that when you're hungry, you gravitate towards food. And that's why Hillel didn't need somebody to teach him that. He was self-motivated. And anybody before Hillel cannot come along and say, well, I had no teacher, because the answer will be, Hillel also didn't have a teacher. He was self-taught, and the obligation is, Hillel mechayev et ha'aniyim. The first Hillel mechayev et ha'aniyim is about the ha'aniyim that came after Hillel. Nimsa, Hillel mechayev et ha'aniyim that came before him as well. The Gemara is repeating it to come and tell you, nobody's exempt. Because if the person understood the value of what the study of Torah is, he should know it on his own, that a body without food cannot exist, and a soul without the study of Torah cannot exist as well. And of course, Shabbat. Sure, Shabbat is the day we're able to make up lost ground. Last but not least, what I heard from Rabbi David Abu Hasena from Nariya. When we visited him once in the yeshiva, he said the following. The question that they're going to ask every one of us after 120 years, one of the questions is, Kavata itim la Torah. Did you set times for the study of Torah? That's the simple interpretation. And everybody's going to have to start, looking at their schedule and bring proofs that they actually, indeed, designated times for the study of Torah, every day. But he explained it a little differently based on the Gemara. I think we might get to it at the end of Baba Kama. Over there, it's talking about a pasuk, V'koveya et kovehem nafesh. There, the word koveya means to rob or to steal. Interesting. Hebrew words sometimes can go both ways. Koveya means to set, but koveya can also mean to steal. Rabbi David Abu Hasana explained, Kavata etim la Torah, they're going to ask you, did you steal time for the study of Torah? Because nobody has time.
Yeah.
Everybody's going to come along and say, well, I was busy. That's true. We're not denying that you weren't busy, but the obligation is not to set times for the study of Torah. You have to steal times for it. And the proof of the pudding is that when something's important enough to a person, he'll find the time for it. You know, the great businessman somehow can always find time for a golf game in the middle of the week. He's always able to find time for some, leisure or some sporting event when it's happening. He can always, rob some time from the office to go out on a social event. If it's important enough, you're able to steal the time. The problem is, again, that Torah is not so pressing to most people that they feel they have to make the ultimate sacrifice of robbing time for it. If the time allots, then by all means. But if it doesn't, we're not willing to sacrifice for it. So the question is going to be, Kavata etim la Torah. Did you steal time and rob time from your personal life in order to study? And the Mishnah is correct when it says, Al tomar likshe'paneh eshya. Don't say, well, when I have the free time, I'll study. Because the Mishnah concludes and says, Shem ve'lo tipaneh. You might not ever get the free time. Once the Yetzer Hara knows that that's the deal, that the deal is when you're freed up, you'll learn, he'll never give you free time then. Because you made a condition with him. You stipulated, when I'm free, I'll learn. The Yetzer Hara will keep you spinning and so busy from one project to the next project, because you made a stipulation. Our stipulation has to be, we're going to study under any situation, under any circumstances. And today, it's quite easy to grab time. Those that drive to work in the morning, one way is, instead of listening to the radio, which really doesn't help too many people, is to put a CD in the player, and look at that. If you travel 20 minutes this way, 20 minutes back, you have 40 minutes. That's stealing time. But again, if Torah is not primary importance, so then you'll feel that those times I can waste in social, in sheipei. So therefore we say again, of course, one must study Torah every single day. Right. But even so, how much can we ask a businessman to study every day? If he studies the Chokmah Yisrael in the day, maybe a few lines of Talmud in the evening, however, b'yomot titen secharo. When the Shabbat comes, Shabbat Rashi Tevot b'yomot titen secharo, there he has to advance himself. V'lo tavo alav hashemesh. That the sun, the neshama, should not have to come and answer the wrong answer Motzei Shabbat. Ki anihu, because the ani when the neshama when Shabbat comes is impoverished, it's starving, hungry. Ve'elav hu noseh et nafsho, and to the Shabbat the neshama is anticipating. So we should be zocher not only to take advantage of the 6 days, but of course to take advantage of Shabbat.
הקדוש ברוך הוא לזכות את ישראל לפי חטיבה להם תורה לעשות שנאמר עלי הפץ תורה זכור יגדיל תורה בידי. כבוד ג'ק